My name is Chip Martin. I work in the carpenter shop.
Well, who's that?
But I must look like a vice president because they let me sit in the front.
Well, who's that with you, Chip?
Oh, this is my supervisor. You could say he sort of has a hand in everything I do. Say, is it true that all these guys and ladies in the first couple of rows are vice presidents?
That's right, they are.
Shows you all the clowns are not in a circus, doesn't it?
These people are not here to be insulted.
No?
No.
Where do they usually go?
No.
Hey, there's Ray Farley, the president and new CEO of Johnson. Hi, Mr. Farley. Who's working his head?
No.
Say, Mr. Farley, I heard that your new job was never posted out at Waxdale, otherwise I never applied. And there's Mr. Johnson, chairman. You know, Mr. Johnson has a unique way of ending all his meetings.
Ending all of his meetings?
Yeah, he says, all those in favor of my idea, say aye. All those opposed to my idea, say aye, resign.
No.
By the way, Mr. Johnson, that's a nice horseshoe haircut. They're coming back in style.
Hello, welcome to Landon Live. My name is Landon Harvey, and today we have the Dale Brown. Dale, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great.
Happy to have you on the show.
Oop. Thank you.
So let's get right into it. Did you start your business first, or did you become a ventriloquist first?
A ventriloquism was sort of a hobby that got out of hand.
Okay.
I did a lot of banquets and corporate events first, and I got some good media publicity, and that sort of catapulted me into bigger shows for corporations and such. So actually, Bill Boley gave me the best advice. I was all set. I was working for a public relations firm and doing ventriloquism on the side, and I was all set to quit the ad agency. And Bill Boley and I corresponded quite a bit. We actually wrote letters. That's how old this is. And and he gave me the best advice I ever got. He was the one who suggested that I combine my two careers, marketing and puppets. And I took that to heart. So I didn't quit my job, and I started implementing puppets as serious corporate communication tools.
Wow, how did you find that transition when you implemented them? What was that like in your experience?
It was I got a lucky break and got a really big job with J.I. Case Company, where we flew all over the country doing different corporate events for J.I. Case, a different one every day. And so I was gone for about 2 weeks. I flew in their corporate jet, and it was I was on stage with one of their I think their senior vice president every day, and he was the one who said, this humor and delivering serious messages through humor really works.
Wow.
We did that for a while, and then I worked for J.I. Case for a couple of years doing events.
Wow, it's phenomenal. How did you figure out you could tie both businesses together, corporate and ventriloquism? You talked to Bill Boley, and then did you have to do research after that? Was it immediate where it kind of just clicked with you, or?
No, we did a lot of research. It was a lot of trial and error. I did a lot of trade show work. And even I think I wrote a book for Mayor at one point on trade show ventriloquism, but trade show work got me a lot of contacts with a lot of other companies, because we were usually a traffic builder. Trade shows it's very hard work, long days, and but you get to meet a lot of people, corporate people. And so I seldom walked out of a trade show without having more trade show work from other companies. So
oh wow,
yeah, and that helped me meet more people that could use humor in their corporate communications. So
sure.
it really
For our audience that might not be as familiar with it, what's it like going into trade shows as a ventriloquist?
It's hard. There's two ways that it's done. Sometimes you'd have a prepared script and you go on once or twice an hour, and there's usually other people involved in that script, and you give and take with the company spokespeople and such. Sometimes if it's in Vegas, there were showgirls involved and such, but that's the easiest, because there's usually a built-in audience already. And when you come out, they're there, and you know what you're doing, and you know when you're doing it. But the other way, and it's the most common way, is that you're the traffic builder. There's nobody. You stand out in the exhibit. There's nobody in front of you, and you have to talk to the people as they go by, try to draw them in, and have to qualify them for the salespeople. And so your ad lib skills have to develop rapidly. It's very long days, but
wow. Well, you see things out there of like trade show magicians where they can just, do a trick and, it draws crowds. Is it that easy as a ventriloquist? Is it harder? I mean,
it's much harder. I had a lot of friends in Chicago that were magicians, and we would work the same shows. And it's easier for them because, for some reason they do get the drive. For me to get a crowd, I often suggested to companies that they have something else in the exhibit, like a pop a shot or a putting, some kind of contest. And then I would draw people into the contest. Then Chip would start chipping at them, and also qualifying them for the salespeople, and that would draw the crowd. And then once you get a crowd, it sort of builds on itself. So, but it's hard to get the crowd. You can work all day and get 3 crowds in a day.
Wow, that's truly neat. So how long did it take for someone who hires you to find out that you're a ventriloquist and you can do their company party? What was that like?
Right. I didn't bring it up for a long time, because it's I found it hurts your credibility when you say you're a puppet. Look at Gettler. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, look, it hurts your credibility. So I didn't bring it up till you see a proper opening. And I was fortunate early in my career. I got a lot of great publicity in national publications. The first one was I was doing the Milwaukee Press Club annual banquet, and they had big, ABC or NBC, the nightly news person was their keynote speaker and such, and I was the opening act. And before I did that show, I got a column written in the Milwaukee Sentinel, and it was a great columnist. I think he was a Pulitzer Prize winner. And he called Chip a hammer with a voice looking for someone to pound on.
Oh,
and
wow.
And matter of fact, do I have it? Yeah, I got 2 sentences from him. He said, Chip's work is similar to that of an axe murderer, but he does it on a stage in a spotlight. Given his choice of weapons, he'll use a train. He missed his calling. He should have specialized in building gallows or plugging in electric chairs. His mother's Don Rickles. And then he goes on for there to talk about all the people that we're going to roast. So that catapulted me immediately in Wisconsin and got me lots of work. So, and also credibility.
Yeah.
And then shortly after we started doing the work for J.I. Case, there was an article about us in the Wall Street Journal called, Can You Drink a Glass of Water and Fire Me at the Same Time? Because we delivered serious, we were doing serious messages. This were like in, I don't know, whenever there was a recession going on and companies were having a tough time, and that's why they were hiring us to come in and help soften very difficult messages. So the headline on the Wall Street Journal article wasn't to my liking, but the article was good. It talked about how we use humor for big Fortune 500 companies. And I actually got work off that article for 15 years. People would call me and say, I had this article in my file. Can you come to our company and do something? So the Wall Street Journal is worth every penny you pay for ads.
Yeah, that's amazing. So wow. So how did that work? Did they have you, I mean, like, did they actually have you say, or fire people, or is it more like after your bit they did it, or before your bit, or do you have any stories from that?
Yeah, we have great stories, but normally at a big corporate event, like the clip you showed ahead of time, that was for Johnson Wax, I think. And there were like 2,500 people in that audience. And plus we were videotaped all over the country for them. So, and that kind of huge event, you have to do lots of research and the scripts have to be approved and everything. But the way it's all set up is, the puppet the person on stage, which was usually a president or vice president, they would, instead of coming out and giving their normal speech, the employees, at one point they would say, does anybody have any questions? And I would be in the second row usually with the puppet, and I had him raise his hand and he says, oh, you have a question, come on up here. And then we would come out of the audience. And Chip would,
oh, that's great.
He would always be introduced as someone that was from the rank and file, one of the employees. He was one of them. So he got to ask the questions and say all the things that the people in the audience would love to have the opportunity or the nerve to ask. So they were always rooting for him. He could talk to the president. I mean, I remember one of the lines for J.I. Case was, if we're all taking salary freezes, why are you still driving a Mercedes to the president? And the president says, I drive a Chevy because they're made in Wisconsin. So, but so instead of just giving a regular speech, we get the audience's attention because they're rooting for this puppet. Yeah. Poking fun at the company. But then he also was asking serious questions. And the questions are the things that the president would have talked about in his normal speech, but people wouldn't have cared. But because he was asking the question, they go, yeah, what about that? And then when the president gives the answer, the puppet repeats part of it. He says, you mean, and then he reinforces it. So they actually hear it twice. So, I mean, we did studies and polls, and the people, their retention more than doubles when the puppet was used and when it wasn't used. So,
how long did that take you to hammer that out, to figure out that that's like tried and true, and you're gonna? I mean, did that take a few shows to get down? Did it just test?
Yeah, J.I. Case helped a lot because they let us do a lot of different corporate events, and we hammered out a lot of details. But once we got the gist of it about the puppet coming out of the audience and being one of them, and that we knew that was a formula that would work. So.
Phenomenal. So were you ever hired twice at these events, and what was that like going in for the second time?
Yeah, some companies used, like I worked for some companies for almost 20 years. Okay. So after we did after people learned that when they saw the puppet, it was going to be a good time. It wasn't just going to be a a serious,
Right.
boring event. Then companies had us create mascot puppets for them, and those mascot puppets would show up at all kinds of events, and we had at one company, we introduced a mascot puppet, and under everybody's chair, and there were probably about 600 distributors, there was a little decoder pen it was a superhero character, and he said he had put a decoder pen under their chairs, and they had it, and with a message that they had to decode with these little pens that they had to rotate, and and so he got all these guys are very successful businessmen in the audience, and they're all
pulling around.
It was a riot. So once we do whatever the puppet said, that was gold. Yeah.
So mascot puppets, that's a neat term. How did that come to be?
Well, I don't even. Verna Finley developed all of my puppets.
Okay.
So we had this idea for superhero. I think the first one was for Kohler Engines, and his name was Captain Magnum, and she came up with little. Oh, he's a matter of fact, he's in the Bent Haven Museum now. He looks a little bit like the Budman, only we had him first. Because he was a superhero, he was just comical in the first place. So what we learned, the clients didn't know this, because at one point we were operating, I think, 12 mascots for 12 companies. And they didn't know this, but most of them were superheroes, not all, but most. And we would just and because he would, most of the puppets wrote newsletters for the companies and did videos and did letters to distributors and customers and such. And so we just used the different costumes for the same character. And a lot of the companies thought theirs was the only one. But
man. That's hilarious. So you're not just performing with this the one time you're hired to do like a banquet and some ceremony. It's different types of content that you're sending in to them for their newsletters or website and anything else like that. Right. Wow.
And the newsletters and such work the same as when you're on the stage. The puppet, it gets away with things that a person can't. Like in the clip you showed in the beginning, the puppet's making fun of the CEO's hair being bald. Well, you can do that as a person, but the puppet does it, and he almost gets a standing ovation for doing it. So, I mean, I've pulled out this really old brochure that we had, but it was called Pulling Strings for More Productive Meetings, Seminars, Training Sessions, Trade Shows, Exhibit, Employee Assemblies, Convention Addresses, Sales and Distributor. So we did a lot. So if you had a mascot puppet, it would do all those things.
So was it like when they would sign up with you to do something like this, what did the mascot puppet, was that like at the end when you would perform with it, so they'd see all this content and then they'd see you perform, or was it at the beginning stage?
It was usually, the mascot would usually come out near the beginning and do all the sales stuff. And then it would be very typical that at night at a big banquet for all these people, I would do my banquet act with my regular character. So,
what did you work with first before CMOC made Chip Martin?
Originally I bought a little mayor figure. Okay. I called him Louis. I was a teacher I taught high school journalism for 6 years, and a friend of mine and I would do an annual banquet for all the other teachers, and it was a very funny banquet, and he and I scripted it all year. Well, he quit teaching, and so I was left with it alone. So I had messed around with ventriloquism when I was a kid, 6th and 7th grade. So I bought a figure from Mayer Studios, took their course over the year, and then did this banquet at the end of the year with a stupid little puppet. And and that's how I got into banquets. So my first puppet was from Mayer, and then I bought a Lobick figure, probably from Mayer too, and that figure's in Bent Haven too. And then I got the CMOC figure. So
phenomenal. How many figures did Al CMOC make for you?
3. 3. He made one for me that I used for a year that I never liked. I just never, he looked like a pixie to me. So when the next year's convention came around, I brought it back to him and said, and he had my current chip on his table to sell. I said, I want that figure. That's the one. So we negotiated throughout the entire convention, and eventually we came upon a deal. So I traded my other one and paid him some more money. And he made
Right.
an old man for me too. But
cool.
I think I don't know what happened to that. If I gave it back to Al to sell or what. But Guido, he was a street sweeper in Venice, Italy. He used an aqua lung in a broom.
Oh, nice.
Mhm.
Love that. So did you switch to Verna, or at the same time that you were getting things made by Al, you found
I
Verna?
found Verna after CMOC made those characters. I found Verna. She was a delight. We would give her, sometimes we would give her just ideas and she would come up with a character, but other times we would have an artist rendering on our end do it. I would send it to her and then she would make the puppets, and they were always perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just like the drawings. And many times we had puppets made to look like the president of a company or vice president. And so she would make character puppets that looked just like him. So we would come out and do a show in front of everybody, and the president would never know that we had this puppet. And at the end of the show, we'd bring out that puppet, and it would be him. So it would be such a huge hit. And then we would give the puppet to the president, so he couldn't be too pissed.
Right.
A puppet, but
That's great.
so it was a one-time deal.
So the character puppet of the president you'd give away, but the mascots you kept, so you had that.
Yeah, I learned early on. We had a character for Harnischweger cranes, big cranes, and he was called Pete Techmeister, and he did newsletters for them, and we did a lot of sales meetings, and he worked at their trade shows. And then one day they asked for the puppet. And I said, what? And they said, well, we paid for him. And so it was a legal puppet. But then after that, we always had a contract with our clients that I owned the characters.
Right.
So I lost one puppet, but the rest I kept. And actually there weren't too many because it was the same guy dressed differently. But.
Well, how did you meet Verna?
That's a good question. I bought a couple of puppets. Was it Beverly Clip? No, somebody repped her at the convention for a number of years. And I think I bought a puppet, and Verna was always this invisible person that nobody had ever met or knew about or something. And somebody, might have been Al Gettler, somebody discovered who she really was. And this lady who was selling for her was selling way over what Verna thought her puppets were being sold for. And when Verna found that out, that was the end of that rep, and Verna came to the convention. So then he made almost all. She never displayed puppets; she made custom puppets. So she was.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I would.
Did you ever have a table, or was it just like you know where Verna is, and you can? Wow.
Right. She never had a table. You would call her up and say, "This is what I need," and she would say yay or nay. She was excellent. She was such a class. Well, I think she's still alive. She's in Florida, but she's such a classy lady. She was great.
I love. She's been a big inspiration in my building, and so it's always neat to hear the stories of how people met her and the things she's built for them. So
yeah, and I would go to visit her in her house when she was building puppets for us, and to say yay or nay on some things. And she was just so much fun. Just a great lady. Her before. We all owe a debt of gratitude to Jim Henson, because before Henson, Ventriloquist didn't use soft puppets because they were kids' puppets.
Yeah.
But he made soft puppets. He legitimized them. And after he had like the Muppet Show on TV and stuff, some vents started using soft puppets. Before that, I can't think of anybody who used one. There might have been a few, but he's the guy who legitimized them. And then we all started, they're easier to travel with. They're easier to operate. It's better. You can get them made faster.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. When did you decide to buy a Selberg?
Well, probably about 4 years before I got it. Let's see. When did I decide? Oh, I know when I decided. We had decided to do a DVD, and so a year before the DVD production, I contacted Selberg, said, I had a jockey figure that Verna made for me. I said, I want to make that jockey. I want a hard figure for that. And I said, but I have to have it for this taping of this show. It was more than a year in advance. So anyway, so he did make the figure, and by the way, it's a marvelous figure. It's outstanding, but he didn't get it done for the DVD. Has the old Verna soft puppet in it.
Oh man.
Yeah. So anyway, that's that story. But I love the jockey that Selberg made for me. I love it. But it was a long wait.
The jockey, how did that come to be? That's an interesting character there.
Yeah, you know, I don't even remember. You know, you have to come up with the character before you have the puppet. I always think. It's very seldom could you spot something at the convention and go, I can make that work, and then you bring it home and you go, what am I going to do with this? I think everybody's experienced that, unless you have an instant thing and it rings true. Right. But most of the time, you have to have something in your head ahead of time. So I don't really know how, but I wrote the script. I had the character all done and everything, and then I called Verna. And it's funny because my jockey's name is Louis, and I'm walking through the museum one day, and in the first building, there's a jockey sitting there on a saddle, by the way, and his name is Louis. And Tom Ladshaw gave me the whole background of this guy. They don't have any tapes of him. They don't have any scripts from him, but he came out, rolled him. He was even on, I think he was on Ed Sullivan. He rolled him out on a saddle and did this jockey bit, and his name's Louis. So
wow.
Yeah.
Was it made by Verna, or was it like a figure?
It's a figure.
Okay. Yeah.
You have to ask Ladshaw who made it. I don't remember.
Wow, that's so crazy. If Verna made a company logo puppet for you, how did you make sure that the company? We already kind of talked about that, but you would kind of talk to them, and it would be like a thing in the contract. You said, right? How you'd make sure that the puppet stays yours, but that you have it you use it for the purposes of the company and for their news to others. Yeah, that's phenomenal. We have a comment here from Dan Satchoff. He said, the Dale Brown, so glad you're talking with Dale. One of the greats and a huge inspiration.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Dale, could you share one of your favorite stories from a show and one of your maybe not worse, but hectic, or something where something went wrong, but for the better?
Yeah, there have been a lot of those. Well, one of my favorite is, because everybody asked me where the Dale Brown came from. It was I was doing a big corporate show, and I put it at maybe the American Club, which is a 5-star resort in Wisconsin. So I pulled into the hotel just to check in, and then I was going to run back to my car and go to the resort. So I go to the hotel, I check in, and I turned to walk away, and the lady at the counter says, "By the way, are you the Dale Brown?" And I said, and at that time, Dale Brown was the coach of the LSU basketball team, and also the famous author Dale Brown. So I turned around and said, "It depends, who's the Dale Brown?" And she said, "The guy with the puppets." And I went, "I'm the Dale Brown." So
that's great.
And I told my wife that story, and she goes, "Oh my God." And just a few weeks after that, we were at a convention, and she told the story at the convention. And since then, I've been known as the Dale Brown. So
I love that. It doesn't work as well though for the Al Getler. I think he tried it once and it just didn't stick.
Yeah, I don't think it's worked. No, not at all.
How much does playing golf help with getting work? How did that work for you?
Well, in the corporate world, in the marketing world, because a lot of people don't understand that I owned a public relations marketing firm, and that's because they asked me, how do you get into the corporate world? Well, I already had an in because I already had credibility as a marketer and a public relations firm. So, I mean, it's not the normal route. But yeah, in the corporate world, in my day, I've been retired for 8 years now. You play golf, you do business in the golf course. Yeah, it was just, you had to learn how to play golf. So you have them for 5 hours on a course. So you're going to, there's fun, but there's also business, and there's nothing to distract you. So.
Sure. What about driving race cars?
That is an expensive hobby. Yeah, I did that for 15 years. Yeah, it was the most fun I've ever had in my life. But it's not an inexpensive sport. They don't tell you in the beginning when you're learning that you're probably going to crash a few times, and that ends up being expensive. But and I ended up in the let's see, a year before I retired, I ended up in the hospital with a big crash at Road America, but which I'm still dealing with. It's my back. I'm having surgery on Thursday.
Okay.
I'm still dealing with a back issue from that crash, but anyway, it was still fun. I would do it again.
Yeah. How did you get into that?
I think a friend of mine suggested I take a Skip Barber racing school up at Road America, and I took a 3-day course, and I got hooked right away. It was the most fun I'd ever had. So it was probably the worst thing I ever did too, because it's not cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, ventriloquism, high-end Selberg figures, and race cars. You picked very expensive hobbies there. Let's see. Dan Satchoff said, "Is Chip the only figure CMOC ever built for him?" No, it is not. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but you can go ahead and answer that in a quick blurb.
He made a man figure for me, Guido, and I think he actually made that because we were doing some kind of corporate training movie, and I had like I think I had 6 or 8 month window before that training film was going to be taped, and I told CMOC about it, and knowing that he took at least a year to make a figure, but he had this Guido figure almost done, and so he finished it off and sent it to me, and I said, yeah, it's perfect. So I used him for a few years, and then I think I offered it back to CMOC so he could sell it again. So but yeah, he was CMOC made great figures. They just have character, you know. They speak to you.
Yeah, everyone that has a CMOC loves theirs. I know that much.
Right.
Absolutely beautiful figures. What is maybe a story from a show that things just went out of control, or something happened in the audience, or something happened that was out of your control?
Annisport, I think at the Hershey Hotel.
Okay.
I think it was the Hershey Hotel. And I was flying in, and this was a big break for me. I hadn't opened for other entertainers yet, so this is going to be a big deal. So the plane lands in Hyannisport. I think that's where you land, and then you have to drive to the Hershey Hotel, rent a car. But when we landed, my big black case that had all the soft puppets wasn't on the plane. I had Chip's head and his body, but none of my other puppets. So I was distraught.
Yeah.
I think I pinned the guy behind the counter up against the wall and said, "How often does this happen?" And he says, "Every flight, every day." So anyway, he said, I told him what was in the case and why I had to have it. And he said, "We'll get it to you. We'll get it to the Hershey Hotel. It'll come in on the next plane and we'll get it to you." So I had to go to the Hershey Hotel. I had to meet the Smothers Brothers and say, "I don't have an act. I got a head." Chip's head, and that's about it. And they were so nice. They go, "We totally understand. Don't worry about it." They were just great. And so I'm backstage waiting, and then the airline delivered the puppets with about 15 minutes to spare. So I was very tense.
Man.
But again, the Smothers Brothers were just great about it. They were super. So it went great.
Wow. And then do you have a favorite show memory that just strikes you as, wow, I wish I could, go back to that and love it again?
Well, I don't know if I have a favorite one, but I always found it interesting, and you probably know this too. You can get a standing ovation one night and you go, "This is the greatest thing in the world. I'm really good." And the next night, the very same show, different audience, you totally die. You not get through the show fast enough. And it's the same stuff. So I've never figured that out, why that is. But it humbles you very quickly, because there's nothing worse than dying on stage. It's just, it's sad. My wife traveled with me a lot, and when she knew I was dying, she would go to the bar and get a drink for me, so she would have it ready when I got there. I remember once we were doing a convention, and I used a shaggy dog as one of my characters, and during the show, his ear fell off, And this was a Beverly Clipper. Is that her name? Clipper. She made the puppet. And this was probably at least my second or third one. Anyway, his ear fell off during the show, and we started ad-libbing about he should be screaming or friends, Romans, countrymen. It was all kinds of ad-libs, and there wasn't one ad-lib that didn't get a bigger laugh than the other one. And in the middle of the ad-libs, the dog yelled out, because my wife's in the back, he yelled out, "Leslie, write all this down because we're going to use it again." So, and she was taking notes. She was writing everything down.
Yeah.
And, so after the show, the next day I called Matt Puppets and said, "Can you make me another dog and Velcro the ear so that I can pull it off every show?" And she did. And so I've been using that one forever.
Oh, wow.
She made a couple for me, but yeah. So that's why the best ad libs are the ones you know that are coming. They happen by accident and you keep them.
Yeah, I love that, and I've heard that bit of advice from many other performers, and it's very true. And I found it true to myself too, as a ventriloquist. So it's truly a neat thing. Who are your inspirations going into the art, and do you have a something someone told you that's always kind of stuck with you for performing?
Well, without a doubt, Paul Winchell was my inspiration. As a kid, he was the guy who was on every Saturday morning, and I was just enamored with him. I bought a Jerry Mahoney puppet out of a Sears catalog with money that I got on my paper route, I think. Okay. And I was in 5th or 6th grade at that time. And then when I was in 7th or 8th grade, I had this great idea, and I painted my Jerry black. And I did a little script and everything, and I brought him out to do a little show for my mother in the living room. And this was during the 60s at the height of racial unrest in this country. Yeah. And I did that show for my mother, and she walked over, she took the puppet, and I never saw it again. It was gone. So apparently,
man,
offensive. I remember nothing about it, but it wasn't a good idea.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, do you have a piece of advice that someone at the convention or a friend has shared with you that's
I don't think it's so much advice, but I've hung around enough with Jeff Dunham to that guy is never not working. I don't think most people understand how much he works. Most of us hone our acts because we're not on TV, or we don't do stadiums and repeat the stadiums every 2 years. So we hone our acts. They may change and evolve, and you make them better all the time, but you don't write a new act every year. Well, Jeff Dunham writes a new act every year. I mean, every show he does, he puts some new stuff in and decides what's good or bad, and then eventually he has a whole new show. Right. He's never not working, and that's the key. To get better, you can never stop working. Every time you have an idea, you got to write it down, and then the next day, get on the computer and start hashing it out and making it better. It's funny because I always thought I honed my show, and then one day Leslie and I are looking at old videos, and some of the videos were only like 3 years old, and my act was totally different. I went, well, why aren't I doing that stuff anymore? That was funny. But you just evolve. You change things and set some things aside and do new. Yeah. It's nice to do new things. I always like getting new characters because
Speaking of new characters, what did you look for when you got a new character, when you had one made? Was there something that you were very particular about? Did it vary?
I'm very particular about eyes. I think CMOC CMOC, a lot of his figures have sleepy eyes where the eyelids are a little bit down, but my Chip, the eyelid is not, and you can see white all the way around the eye. His eyes are big, and all of my characters, the eyes are big. It's a focal point for me. It adds character, and they look better on stage, I think. Everybody has their groups, but that's for me.
Yeah, that's a great point. The eyes are the the gateway to the soul or something like that?
That's right. That's
love that. Love that. Yeah. That's a big thing I look at too when I build puppets, making sure that, when you look at the profile of the puppet, not having to tilt the head down, or that you can see,
Right. I have a bag lady that Verna made for me, and she's very similar to, I think Bill DeMar had one, and
Ron Lucas.
Ron Lucas. And so they all look a little bit alike, but they have a big nose. And
I think Jeff Dunham had one when he years ago.
Did he really?
Yep.
Oh, excellent. So it has a big nose, and you got to make sure that if it's looking straight out, the nose doesn't cover the eyes, because puppets it does. So
that's funny that you brought that up. What was the story behind the bag lady? Because that's a very specific look, and so it was funny to see it used by other performers.
Oh, I don't know who had it first. Do you know who had it first?
No, I don't either. And I don't think I talked to Bob, and we were talking about that the other day, and he's like, I have no idea who had it. I don't think anyone knows.
I know Bill DeMar his was a troll.
Okay.
What is Ron Lucas's? Is that a troll too?
Yeah, I think he called it like Tilly the Troll.
Okay. I think DeMar might have had his before mine, because when DeMar was coming through town, he often would stay at my house, and he would pull puppets from my daughter when she was really little. And I think I remember him pulling out his troll, but at that time I wasn't thinking anything about. I just wanted a puppet with a big nose. I don't think I asked her to copy his, but that's why.
Right.
I like puppets that use props. And with a bag lady, you can pull stuff out of her bag. Like in my act, I pull out pictures of her past and of her husband and
I love that.
Booze. And so anyway, it gives you, it helps write the script for you. It makes it easier. Actually. You can say you're pulling out a picture, but it can actually be the script.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah, I'm working on a character. She's an old lady. That's kind of she's with the old man character that I have in my show. So her name's Patty, and she's much older. But I'm working on this prop where it's her purse, but it's got a false bottom that sits on a stand, so you can reach your entire arm in there and then just pull out.
That's a great idea.
Pull out a bunch of random props that I bought from the dollar store.
Right.
Just stuff an old lady would have. But it's really, I love that too, because it changes the perspective of the ventriloquist with a puppet, and then it's two characters on stage focusing on something else.
Right. Absolutely correct. I used to do a lot of magic in my act with a puppet, never alone, but with it. So I would have to find magic that you could do one-handed, and it's not easy to do that. Yeah. But magic, as a rule, and it's, if something goes wrong, you only have one hand and you can't fix it. So I did it a few times at the convention, and it went over really well. But eventually, I went, I'm just going to stick to ventriloquism.
Mm-hmm.
I even did the vanishing bottles trick. You know which one it is? Where the bottle and the glass switch sides. I found a way to do it one-handed, and the puppet would always, as an aside, he would tell me which one to put it in, and the volunteer would be guessing, and the volunteer would always guess correct, and the puppet thought I was always screwing up. But the trick works itself, so it doesn't take any skill. But
that's crazy.
That was fun. I remember because I did it at the convention, and the volunteer was a guy named, I think it was Pastor Paul. He was from the state of Washington. Pastor Paul. And he was up there, and he was always getting it right. And Chip leaned over once and said, "It's no fair praying," because he was always getting it right. So, at that time, half of the convention were gospel events. So went over.
Really?
Yeah, in the beginning. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Early conventions. Yep.
Wow. So let's talk about convention, because that's an interesting thing. So were you there for the first convention, or has it? No.
I started going in the early 80s at some point, I guess.
Okay.
So I wasn't there for the beginning, but I did chair a convention, so I know how much work that poor Mark has to go through. But it's come a long way. It runs.
How has it evolved since the first convention you've attended?
It's much more organized, and this is all attributable to Mark Wade. It's more organized. It's more diverse. He has something for everybody. It used to be, I don't know, it was very, I don't want to say it was cliquey, but it was just, there would be there were separate workshops for separate kinds of groups, and it just wasn't. It sort of divided us instead of bringing us all together. So Mark's brought us all together. My worst experience was when I was chairman. You've heard of Cecil Carpenter, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I was his biggest fan. I would cry every time I saw his act. I couldn't, you can't catch your breath. I would laugh so hard.
Yeah.
So he came late to the convention the year I was chairman. He wasn't performing. He just got out of the hospital with a heart condition. He checked himself out of the hospital. All right. So he comes to the convention, and everybody loved Cecil. So everybody's happy that he's there, but he looked gray. He didn't look well. He died at the convention. He died on Saturday night or Friday night, I guess, maybe. He passed away. So, and it was late at night. So most people didn't know anything about it. So I was the person who had to tell everybody the next morning. We used to have an awards breakfast every year where we'd pass out all the awards for best manipulation, best junior event, all this stuff. And it was a breakfast, and there was a big dais and stuff, and the event of the year award would be given out then and everything. So, and it was a great time. But that was the morning. The first thing I had to tell people was that Cecil Carpenter died. So I called that night before. I called Clinton Detweiler to my room. I was throwing up because I was going. The whole convention is going to go down the tubes here because this poor guy died. So Clinton Detweiler came to my room, and we had a minister come and somebody else. So we were all saying, okay, what are we going to do? And we decided, I would mention it. We'd have the minister come up. He would do a prayer. And we would, and Cecil didn't have much money, so we also had a collection bucket right in front of the dais that people could. We got a substantial amount of money to give to his family. So anyway, that was a horrible moment and a horrible part of the convention, but it happened.
Wow. So you talked a little bit earlier about the awards banquet and how it's kind of changed. Do they still do a Ventriloquist of the Year award?
No.
Or are there things that kind of were dated and have changed since then?
Yeah, it's pretty much. I think I'm not exactly sure. You'd have to talk to Mark about this. When I got it, it was voted on by the entire convention. Everybody had a vote. They would just throw their votes in a box during the convention. And I have two great photos of myself and Jeff Dunham, and one is when Jeff Dunham he read that I won the award, and we're up on the podium together, and he read that I wasn't even thinking about it. I was running the convention. I wasn't thinking about it. So anyway, that's one of my favorite photos of him being there. But I think after that, I got so busy at work that I think people started running campaigns to get to win that, and that sort of turned people off. And I think that's when Mark said he pulled the plug on it, which was probably a good idea because they're
running campaigns.
Pardon?
They were running campaigns.
I think people were. Yeah, they would they'd say, "Vote for me, vote for me."
Right.
But initially, nobody did that. It was just it was whoever everybody thought should get it. It was.
Well, I was reading somewhere. I think it was in Jeff Dunham's book that back then at the convention, there was a most deserving event award or something where it was a junior mic competition, and the winner would get a figure.
Yeah, they got a CMOC figure. He got a Dunham got a CMOC figure.
Yeah,
Archie. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was worth winning.
Now
what do you get? A little piece of paper, right?
I got a piece of paper a couple of years ago saying that I participated.
Right.
But everyone got that beforehand, and so we're all winners. Even though you can only have one winner. So I asked her. I said, "Does this mean I won twice if I win this year?"
You know what it is though. Mark doesn't want to hurt feelings because
of course,
and parents don't like their kids to lose. Parents are worse than the kids. I do the IMC the junior event every year. It's my favorite part of the convention, always has been, and I will tell you why. And I think you might have been part of this one. There was a kid whose act went 2 minutes too long, and Mark's
that was me.
You? Was it you?
It was me. Yeah.
That's excellent because that's why I love that. Every kid said they gave part of their time to you. They said mine doesn't run as long as it should. Every kid said you could have their time. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I remember.
2 minutes long. Yeah. I thought the kids are great because the adults would never do that. They would go,
No.
no, throw them out.
Yeah, it was hilarious. I think mine was like, I think the limit was 6 and mine was like 8 or something.
Yep.
And and it was, I had, everyone was like, well, I've got a few minutes I'm not using, and it was like, oh, everyone was pitching it. I'm like,
yeah,
oh,
no, they just all volunteered it.
yeah.
Yep.
But it's
Well,
really
I don't
cool.
think they would have done that if there was a CMOC figure involved.
Yeah, probably not. Probably. So I guess there's that balance there.
Right.
I'm curious. We talk about the junior mutt competition. How did you start emceeing that, and what? I mean, that must be really neat. I remember the last time I performed, almost every kid had an old man puppet.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you get to be part of that?
I'm not sure how I got. Who did it for years and years from Chicago?
Not Bob, is it?
Bob Isaacson.
Oh, Bob Isaacson. Yeah.
He did it forever. And I think that Al Gettler might have done it once or something. But after Bob Isaacson passed away, I think Mark was looking for somebody to step in and he would just handle this. You just do it all the time.
Right.
So I think that's how it happened. He just said, he knew I liked it and said, would you just do it every year? And so that's just my spot. It's great. And the kids are they're the most talented. I mean, they come up with the most unique things. They don't copy. They don't copy, which is the great thing. They're all original. They don't stand up there and read out of an old joke book or something. It's all original. It's great stuff.
Yeah. It's man, it's really. I remember 2 years. It was 3 years ago, but I had performed and I went up without the figure when I was introduced, and I performed and I said, "How are we all tonight?" And then the year after, every kid did that, and I was the last act. So
right.
Literally, it was from the first act, and they all asked how. It was just great. But yeah, I love, and I'm growing up with these kids too that are in this junior mic that were in the junior mic competitions and seeing new talent, of course, as well. And I've been fortunate enough to build some puppets for them, and so it's really neat seeing that the future of ventriloquism is in safe and creative hands.
So you guys become close, right? Every year you see each other.
Yeah. Every year we see each other, and I'm good friends with Jeff Goltz and Meredith Myers, and oh my gosh, Peter Michaels Jr. But then I'm also the younger Vince, like Jesse Smith and Rain Jennings and all of them. So it's truly great. David Allen Turner said, "Ask Dale, does he eat before shows?" And then he said, "Beef Farmers Cooperative."
Oh, that's funny. How does he know about that? So I had to do a show for the Illinois beef producers.
Okay.
And by the way, which is the best banquet, bar none, in the country, because it's their beef and they cook it themselves. Everybody gets a prime rib.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot of people, and it's the best prime rib you could ever have. I think this is what he's talking about. So, I normally don't eat much before, but that night I ate them. It was outstanding. Anyway, so in my contract, there's a deal. They have to use my introduction. The introduction gives you credibility if it says you did all this stuff and whatever. So the way they introduced me that night, the banquet was just north of Chicago, and I'm from Wisconsin. So they introduced me as the only Packer fan in the room, and they booed me on stage.
Oh man.
They booed me on stage. So I started at an 8-foot hole. I had to dig my way out. Yeah, that was excellent. Mm-hmm. What was the other part of his question?
I think it was just he was just alluding to that. That's that show. Wow, that's
that's why you have in your contract you have to use my introduction. And they use it.
Yeah. Wow.
I got introduced once. This is when I was just starting out. I was only doing banquets, and I was still working. And I did a class reunion, and before I went on, they lit a candle for every person who had died. And there were people in the audience crying. And while they're still crying, they said, and now here's our entertainment. That was my introduction.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny because you hear these stories and you're like, okay, well, that's crazy. That's never gonna happen to me. And then you like do like a show and you're like, oh, well, like I did a church show a couple months ago and I'm like, oh, well, they know what they're doing. The lady hired me. It's gonna be fine. The guy goes up, he does, about 10 minutes of like stock online church jokes that warms up the crowd. And I'm like, this is gonna be great. Then some lady gets up there with her husband who has the guitar. They've got like 2 music stands. She puts her Bible on my puppet stand, and they decide that they're going to share verses and talk about all the people that they've lost over the past year, and then sing 3 of their favorite hymns. And then they don't even say anything. They just finish the songs and then walk off. And like, the lady's like, yeah, I think they're almost done. They've only got 1 more song. And I'm like, this is like their 3rd song. It's crazy. Oh my gosh. It's really, you become the like the event manager almost, or the entertainment manager when you deal with these things.
And the best stories I've heard, I would do magic conventions and such. So you're backstage with all these big entertainers and everybody has their stories. And by the time you go on stage, you've been laughing so hard at all these stories. It's the best backstage before that. It's so much fun. Yep.
Love that. Well, Del Brown, what do you hope to see from the future of ventriloquism and from future events?
Well, I think it's great that we have Terry Fader, Darcy, and Jeff and Jay. Those 4, because it's interesting. I took friends of mine in Vegas. I took them to see Terry Fader, and then later that year I took them to see Jeff Dunham. Some of my friends really like Terry Fader. They think he's the best thing, and other people think Jeff Dunham's the greatest. And that's what's great about having those 4 people. They're all different, and they all appeal to a different crowd. They're not really competitors. No. So that's outstanding. It's good for our art. And Darcy is outstanding for our art because she's. If you look at her audience, all these kids have her puppets. They're all. It's great. It's really great. So, and she's such a sweetheart. Her and her parents are just so nice. It's very refreshing.
Yeah. So you hope to see just creativity and more people be inspired by the current staples of ventriloquism today?
Right. I think it's really great that, especially, Jeff is I admire Jeff so much because he's so original. His stuff is all new. He makes his own puppet. Who makes their own puppets and performs?
Not a lot of people.
And he's so confident in his builds, by the way, that he seals the heads. Did you know you can't get into it?
I heard that. The level, yeah.
It's outstanding. Who has that nerve? But it just his creativity and work ethic, I'm just in awe of. It's outstanding. It's a pleasure to call him a friend. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's really nice. I heard that too on I think one of his live streams that he was talking about he was building his new character during quarantine. He was talking about how he seals off everything.
He does.
I was like, that really took me by surprise.
I think is it in his book about his helicopter crash? Is that in there? Because he told me the story, but I think it's in his book too, right?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Well, he built his helicopter. Then he's out practicing, and he's going to practice auto rotation. That's where you turn the engine off, and your copter's facing into the wind, so it'll spin the prop, and you get it restarted before you hit the ground. Well, when he turned the engine off, apparently it wasn't pointed into the wind, and he crashed into a cornfield, I think. And so he called his friend, and his friend brought a truck out, a flatbed, and they put the copter on the back of the flatbed and took it back to the airport. And eventually, Jeff rebuilt that helicopter. So his friend said, you know what? You got to go over that same cornfield and do that same thing and practice your auto rotation. He said, because I've never heard of anybody crashing a helicopter in the same place twice. So Jeff, I think, went out and did it. But
yeah. That's phenomenal. That's great. Terry Hay commented, the kids are one of my favorite part of convention as well. Oh yes, yeah, they're great, absolutely phenomenal. It's truly neat to see what they come up with. Yeah, that's great. Well, Dale Brown, thank you so much for being part of Landon Live and for sharing your story.
It's my pleasure, Landon. I really appreciate you doing all these interviews. It's great to see all these events. Really is.
Definitely. And thanks to all of you guys who are here tonight and have tuned in with us. And we'll upload this on YouTube too, so it'll always be here on the archives.
Excellent. Thanks, Landon.
Thanks, Dale. You guys take care.
Bye-bye.